Welcome to another edition of Rotten Reviews. Today I'm going to talk about the 2008 movie The Happening. This movie is completely rotten. We have a tomato meter score of 18%, an audience score of 24%. It definitely deserves all of its rottenness. I wouldn't say it deserves a lower rotten score. In fact, maybe this should actually have a higher rotten score. It should still be rotten, but the numbers should be higher. And the reason I say that is because if you consider this movie to be a comedy instead of what the director intended and marketed it as, a horror, then as a comedy, this movie delivers. You will laugh. You will laugh out loud. You will laugh out loud often. And you don't have to drink to do this. You don't have to partake in any smoke. Certainly that would make it even better. But this is just, you have to take this as straight up comedy. Now, this film was supposed to be a horror, um, supernatural type M. Night Shyamalan, standard fare. That's not what was delivered to the audience. The audience got a comedy. Mark Wahlberg is the star of this, and he plays this in a comedic fashion. You can go ahead and ignore everything he says about the movie in interviews. If he doesn't admit that he was playing this in a comedic fashion, then he's not being honest. He was. He's looking right at the camera when he does it, and it delivers. This is funny. It's kind of like turning the horror genre on its head and just making you laugh out loud. Now, if you want to take it as a horror movie, and you just keep trying to push through it like that, you're going to find it offensive. You're going to find it insulting. And if you paid, $12 or whatever it was back in the day to see this in the theater, and you tried to push through this like you were expecting a horror movie, you are going to be quite angry. So let's get into the rotten reviews. And let's see what else everybody else thinks out there in computer land. We have one from October 13th of 2019, very recent. 1 star. The Happening offers some frightful chills, and if it was about mass paranoia, it could have actually been an effective thriller, but this is definitely M. Night Shyamalan's worst film, even more so than The Last Airbender. It's not as hilarious as The Room, but it comes pretty close with the horrendous acting from its two lead, stilted line delivery and pretentious script. It doesn't help that Marky Mark looks and sounds like he's reading some of his lines off of cue cards half the time. To be fair, yeah, yeah. There's a kind of a toss up here. It's sometimes it does seem like Mark Wahlberg is reading his lines off of giant cue cards that somebody's holding up, off screen. But no, more fairly, he's just doing it in a comedic fashion. He's delivering almost like one-liners at parts that are meant to be somehow dramatic but are played up in a hammy fashion and make you laugh out loud. There are several of these. Let's continue. 3.5 stars. So many people didn't like it. Why so many people didn't like it is beyond me. They must have had tiny brains. I liked it. Quite different than most sci-fi movies. Well, number one, this isn't a sci-fi movie. It's meant as a horror movie. And if you're saying you liked it because you laughed out loud, then I agree. It's got laugh out loud funny stuff. You have crazy stuff happening. Particularly, you have people killing themselves in different ways, mass suiciding themselves that are meant to be scary. They have scary music attached to them, but they're just straight up laugh out loud funny. In particular, there's a scene where a police officer kills himself out on the street in traffic, and somebody else, another pedestrian on the street, comes along, picks up his gun, walks 2 or 3 feet, puts the gun to their head and kills themselves. Then they fall down, the gun falls back to the road. Another pedestrian comes along, does the same thing, and this carries on 2 or 3 or 4 times, and it's flat out funny. People picking up this gun and suiciding themselves. It's like something out of a Monty Python script, except the whole time it's got an ominous horror vibe music playing, and it's got horror film type camera angles, but yet the comedy doesn't stop. Let's read on. 3 stars. I've seen some recent reviews and comments from both M. Night and Wahlberg about how bad the movie was. It's misrepresentation. Supposed to be humorous, best B movie you've ever seen. Guess I don't know a bad movie. I liked the concept. In fact, the only irritation was that Zoe D actress. I either hated every movie I've seen her in or really wish she wasn't in it. We'll say if it was supposed to feel like a B movie, that was a fail, though, arguably a film that didn't reach full potential. Okay, so this reviewer said that he's seen some interviews in which, Wahlberg and Shyamalan are saying that this was intended as being a B movie spoof. No, I don't think so. That's not the way this is marketed. But, I mean, if we go ahead and retcon it to be that, then yes, this could be 3 stars because you do laugh out loud many times. They're also referring to Zoe Deschanel. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name right. Deschanel or whatever. She plays the entire movie with the same expression on her face. She's got wide eyes and kind of a slightly agape mouth, and she almost looks like a mannequin caught like a deer in the headlights, so to speak. And she's like that in every scene all throughout the movie, nonstop. So yeah, maybe she was trying to make this a comedy too. Again, that's why I say, as a comedy, this is 3 star, laugh out loud. But that's not the way M. Night marketed this. That's not the way he spoke of this before the film was released. And that's not what the marketing showed. And that's not what the trailer for the movie. I believe there was at least 1, if not 2 trailers for this. Neither one promised a comedy. They promised a straight up horror or suspense. So I don't buy the retconning of it now. I mean, if I were Mark Wahlberg, I would go ahead and take the same tact I did when I opened this video, that yes, this is a straight up comedy. That's a smart thing to do, but I don't think that's what he thought. I think he either sabotaged the movie with his acting, or M. Night told him to do this and he just followed along perfectly. But I don't think he actually... I don't think, tongue-in-cheek, that he actually expected this, he planned this as being a comedy. I don't think the actors did. But I just say that from the beginning of my rotten review because, you won't get mad that way. You'll enjoy this. You will consider that the rotten reviews, it deserves to be rotten, but it doesn't deserve, lower than, say, a 50%. Moving on. 1.5 stars. A dumb and poorly executed movie with miscast actors, however unintentionally funny at times. No, I disagree. This is unintentionally funny at almost every scene. Let me give you another example. There's a scene in which it's well telegraphed in advance that one of the characters is going to die very soon. He gets into a Jeep. That Jeep proceeds to drive at, say, 40, 45 miles per hour, straight dead stop into a huge tree. Now we know what happens to the people inside. They'd be killed instantly. Apparently everybody in it was, except for him. He's a passenger. He immediately pops out of the passenger side door after this Jeep has hit the tree at 40 miles an hour, pops out, walks out calmly, not scratched, then sits down in the middle of the road and proceeds to cut his wrists with a piece of broken glass from the Jeep slowly. This is straight up comedy. You can laugh. The whole thing is a farce, and it's like filmed like in a horror way, but it's done as a farce. So let's move on. 0.5 star. I was about to fall asleep 4 times, and I almost fell asleep once halfway through, but I'm 100% sure there was something happening. Thank God this is only 90 minutes long. Well, they do allude to something else. I've seen other reviewers count the number of times that the word "the happening" is used in dialogue. It's dozens and dozens of times. You will lose count. This is something M. Night thought that this would be edgy or funny or cool, to see how many times he can make the characters say "the happening" in their dialogue. Yeah, if you're going to have to get one of those click counters out, and you're going to have to start in from the beginning, because you're going to lose track because it's dozens of times. 2 stars. Not a lot happens in The Happening. During the hot dog scene, I wasn't sure to laugh, shake my head, or just cringe. Like, what just happened? You start going on about hot dogs getting a bad rap, and then you explain the big twist, and we're not even halfway through the movie yet. The premise is interesting, but it's failed in its execution. Well, unless you consider that that's a comedy skit, okay, the reviewers were referring to one part of the movie in which a a character who becomes like one of the known characters. He's introduced to us in a scene in which he tells one of the other characters, gives them a lecture on how hot dogs aren't bad, they've gotten a bad rap, and how, he's giving like a mini lecture about, how hot dogs have gotten a bad reputation. And at the same time, he tells his theory, being a plant specialist, that it's the plants, the trees, whatnot, that are, killing the people by releasing some kind of toxin. And this is about halfway through the film. And yeah, you don't know whether to laugh or not, because on one hand, it's diverted into why hot dogs have a bad rap for no reason right out of the blue, and then all of a sudden diverts straight into the reason for the film, taking the complete mystery out of it. It's very strange. Half a star. Mark Wahlberg tries to be a science teacher. He fails. He talks to a plant. It fails. Wahlberg and Zoe Deschanel attempt to make a convincing couple. They fail. The movie tries to build suspense and scares. It fails. This whole movie is just a boatload of fail. Unintentionally, hilariously awful. Yes, it is hilarious. Mark Wahlberg is a science teacher. At the beginning of the film, he's got a class full of students. He doesn't look, strangely, he doesn't look like a teacher. He looks like he could almost be one of the students, and he acts like an idiot. And for a science teacher, he's diverting into the land of mystical in a speech to the high school kids. It's a lot worse than Nicolas Cage's teacher, college teacher in the movie Knowing. That was bad, but this is really hammy and bad, and it's pointless. It's not laugh out loud funny, but it's just bizarre watching Mark Wahlberg play a high school mentality science teacher that's not really into science. It's very weird. 1 star. I watched this with my brothers when it came out, and until this day, I remember how stupid it was. Like, the whole audience was laughing throughout the movie, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't supposed to be funny. Again, it's funny, but I don't think M. Night actually intended it to be. Maybe the actors did. That's, it's like I get that vibe, like the actors knew this would be funny, or they knew it was so bad that they decided to play it in a comedic way. But then again, you have to wonder, wouldn't they be following the directions of M. Night? It's very weird to try to figure out if this was intentional or not. I can make a case either way, and I can't quite get a handle on it. But you have to take it as straight up comedy. You will enjoy this. Half a beer in, you're going to laugh your ass off. Half a star. Mark Wahlberg, John Leguizamo, and Zoe Deschanel are wonderful actors, and the director M. Night Shyamalan has directed fantastic movies. That's debatable. This is not a movie worthy of such talent. The plot line could have been made for an amazing lead. However, I'm not sure if it's the script or the director who created such a strange, unconnected, and contradictory film. Wahlberg appears to be a savant biology teacher. He often says the most insanely naive and non-scientific hypothesis. Yeah, they're just restating what I did about the science teacher. He's a science teacher that doesn't believe in science. It's really weird. 3 stars, brilliant concept, horrible dialogue, waiting for a remake. I could see like a continuation, a straight up comedy, kind of like Hot Shots Part 2. That would work, but market it as a comedy so people don't get, upset. 5 stars. Tense, exciting, compelling, packed with amazing performances and visual thrills. The Happening is easily Shyamalan at his very best. His directorial debut, The Sixth Sense, pales in comparison to this masterpiece. Can't believe it has such a low approval rating. That's straight up sarcasm. I guess they're kind of trying to do it in the spirit of the movie. 1 star. The Happening has a premise that seems reasonable on paper. Too bad that it unravels really quickly. The story was incoherent. The acting was irritatingly dreadful, just like the script. The directing was messy, and it's not scariest in the slightest of margins. Actually, it's hilarious at how bad this movie is. with an ending twist which evolves around plants making people commit suicide. Wow, a new low for the once promising director. Um, no, I think it's, it's a comedy. The way people commit suicide is so nonsensical too. There's a scene where they're driving into a town and there are people who have obviously gotten really tall, like 40-foot ladders, put them up against giant oak trees, climbed to the tops of the ladder, somehow taken the trouble to secure these elaborate hangman's nooses onto these oak trees, and then all hung themselves on the various oak trees. It's like a comedy. You laugh out loud when you see it because, I mean, it doesn't make sense even in a world in which people would do this, they would all be suicidal and do this collectively and they put thought into it. It wouldn't make sense. It would be funny. But it's just in the context that these people are kind of like turned into mindless zombies that just robotically kill themselves, but they've fashioned these elaborate hangman's nooses over these huge trees with all these giant ladders. It's like a work of art in its comedy, and it's laugh out loud. You just laugh out loud. There's no other way to take it. There's another scene in which a person lays down in the path of a giant automated lawnmower and, makes sure he moves the guard up on the front of it so that his body goes under the front, and then it shows the blood spraying out. And it's, like it comes straight out of something like a, Attack of the Rotten Killer Tomatoes movie or something. It's very bizarre and funny. It just goes on from there. I'll talk about some more if they pop back to my mind when I'm reading these. 1.5 stars. The Walmart version of a Stephen King themed movie, in my opinion. Also, why is Mark Wahlberg so bad in this? He is an amazing actor, but I just wasn't feeling it in this film. No, he's playing it straight up comedy. He's looking right into the camera nearly and like making facial expressions and drawn out vocal tones that it can only be interpreted as him trying to be funny. And it is funny. You laugh out loud. In what should be a scary scene. 2.5 stars. Seeing people kill themselves, wild plot, eh? I guess we should take care of the planet before I start talking about calculus. Yeah, I don't know what they're trying to say there. 4 stars. I love this movie. I've seen it twice. It's like an extended movie version of a Twilight Zone episode. Mark Wahlberg and Zooey Deschanel are watchable for me in everything they do. I'm sure it had flaws as a major movie release, but I honestly was creeped out and had to look away many times. I just really enjoyed this movie. Why don't I believe you? 2 stars. I always thought The Happening got a bad rap until today. I just came to realize I have never finished the movie. I always assumed everyone died, but now watching Mark Wahlberg watching the girl take off in the school bus, everything is the same except the girl can't talk now and the TV sums up why it happened. The scene of them watching TV is such a cop-out, and I realized they had set it up for a sequel. Unfortunately, if that were to happen, none of these actors will be in it, guaranteed. Wow, this reviewer is like way out there on this, imagining stuff. I mean, he's correct in summarizing the ending. It ended with the main character, Mark Wahlberg's character, putting the young girl on the school bus to school. On the TV is playing like some exposition in a newscast explaining, what had happened, and supposedly society has returned to normal. But the stuff this reviewer is reading into that set up for a sequel, no. It was just like, I don't know, a bad attempt at comedy at the end. The ending was unsatisfying. It wasn't funny. It was pointless. It actually explained to you what happened as though you didn't know about it from halfway through the movie. There was no twist. Again, a character was talking about how hot dogs were getting a bad rap. He pretty much stated what was happening in the movie. There was no twist from that point going forward, and yet the movie ended with a scene that needed to explain to you what had happened, as though it was a twist. So even if it was intentional, it wasn't funny. It's just weird. 1 star. This is one of the funniest films I've ever seen, but it was not intentionally made that way. I'll agree. It is very funny, and I don't think that's what M. Night was trying to do, but I think the actors somehow were. I don't know, was it the actor's middle finger to M. Night Shyamalan? I don't know what's going on here. It's weird. 5 stars. A fantastic, gripping story starting with bees straight onto the earth defending itself from us polluting humans with a survival-style story. A classic M. Night Shyamalan film ending with an original cliffhanger. This has to be sarcasm because, yeah, it has to be. Half a star. Wow, I've seen some stupid movies before, but this has to be worse. Total garbage. Again, you're missing that it's a comedy. 1.5 stars, Spanish. 4 stars. The Happening is a great movie. If you love zombie sci-fi movies, no. You should have said if you like comedies. But then they end here on this 4-star review with the OG Bird Box. No, the Bird Box was not meant to be a comedy. You know, there's arguments on whether it was a good movie or not, but certainly there was nothing about the Bird Box that was attempting to be funny, not even by accident. So no, you're reading this movie way too serious. Half a star. Contender for worst movie of all time. Horrible script, preposterous dialogue, terrible acting, so bad it is unintentionally funny. I agree. 1 star. There's nothing here. Well, at least it appears so. A film like this presents us with information without managing to create art. Visuals in this film are bland, plain, and boring. When a director is presenting us with a theory about the end of the world, we deserve lots of eye candy and neat features in relation to the problem. Here, if I wasn't fluent in English as a native, I wouldn't know what happened, what occurred, and what transgressed. The happening can indicate in subtle manner. Yeah, he's making a point about again, the movie has like long scenes of showing plants with ominous music playing. But, you know, if you didn't know what the premise of it was, you would just think you're seeing scenery. Like if you turn the sound off, it would look like you were just seeing a landscape of plants. You wouldn't know what it was about. It's only the creepy music that, you know, put over the long shots of trees and plants and grass that give you any hint that there's a horror intent. It's very much a fail from a visual standpoint. I call it wasted footage. M. Night put a lot of effort into something that would be just called wasted footage and should be edited out. Half a star. I saw this in the theater. It was probably the worst movie I've seen in the last 20 years. Yeah, could be. Half a star. Unintentionally, The Happening is a comedy of bad filmmaking. The premise, the acting, and the logic expressed in this pile of garbage is so shockingly rolled out, you just end up rolling your eyes in disbelief. Zooey Deschanel gives the worst performance I've ever seen since Characters in the Room. Throughout the entire film, this wide-eyed character with no common sense or conscience forever stains the actress in my eyes. Mark Wahlberg shows how terrible he can act too, and his timing and delivery are, well, I'm going to guess they were going to say timing and delivery was comedy, timing and delivering. Again, I think that these actors were intending this, they were intending to make this comedic. Now, see, that's the problem, is I don't know if M. Night was directing them to do this or not. Certainly, he's the director. He should have seen what was going on or what was happening, right? Pun intended. But they deliver, their timing and facial expressions are straight up comedy. So if M. Night didn't know, if he's incompetent enough that he didn't know what they were doing, it is kind of a middle finger to him. Maybe they weren't getting the salaries they wanted. I mean, I don't get it. They do deliver. They do comedy timing. Mark Wahlberg is funny when he wants to be, and he's funny in this movie. Half a star. Mediocre comedy, awful acting. I'll agree. As a comedy, it's mediocre, but I laughed out loud several times. 4.5 stars. The Happening is everything a typical bad M. Night Shyamalan film is, but this one has a completely confused and out there performance by Mark Wahlberg that makes this film a must-watch. Yeah, you will laugh out loud. 1.5 stars. What is happening? No pun to M. Night. He slides down the slide with every film of his. The Happening is so bad it is an unintentional parody. This film is a bore, with none of the tension and suspense needed to keep us interested. Even simple scenes reek of contrivance. Everything in this movie is artificial. take to a level, or fake to a level beyond what even those with blockbuster benumbed senses will endure. We don't believe in these people, their relationships, their circumstances, or even the things they say. Yeah, I'll agree with that. It's completely ridiculous. Not only the logic of it, but the relationships between the characters are ridiculous. The events as they play out are ridiculous. The character reactions to things that play out are ridiculous. There's even a scene in which Mark Wahlberg and his I don't know her name, the actress that's his love interest. I'm not clear on whether they were married or whether they're just like cohabitating or what the story is there. That could be me not paying attention, or it might be a failure of the movie. I don't know. In any case, there's a point in the movie in which they're separated by a few hundred yards in a farmhouse. And even though they're only separated for about 10 minutes, they come back together 10 minutes later, and they're standing outside in a field with a breeze, and they're reuniting with each other as though they haven't seen each other in months. And it's played up as that effect, and it's completely over the top and comedic, but it's not played comedic. It's just wow. You do have to see it to believe it, like what some of the reviewers have said. Half a star. I don't know if this was a book originally. If so, it should have stayed a book. One of the worst movies ever. I don't actually know, but I can't imagine the book would be as intended as a comedy. No, I don't think so. Half a star. I saw this when it first came out in the cinema and remember thinking I'd been cheated. I started watching this again this evening thinking it couldn't be as bad as I remembered, but it was worse. The acting is wooden and often the props do a better job. If the dialogue was improvised, it would have been bettering, make more sense. There is nothing naturalistic about any of this, and it makes Herzog's Heart of Glass seem like a lively work in part. There is nothing redeeming about this movie. Well, that reminds me of one part in which Mark Wahlberg's character, and remember, he's a scientist. He's a scientist and a science teacher. He actually spends time in one scene talking to a plant and trying to be nice to a plant to convince the plant that they mean it no harm, and they just want to go into this house to use the bathroom and etc. And then he finds out that of course this is a plastic plant that he's talking to, and it is so ridiculous, and laugh out loud when he's like, and his reaction to finding out that it's a plastic plant that he's talking to. I just don't know what to say. 4 stars. The Happening is a lightning-paced, heart-pounding, paranoid thriller about a family on the run from an inexplicable and unstoppable event that threatens not only humankind, but the most basic human instinct of them all, survival. I'm going to take that as sarcasm. Let me tell you about the exciting, thrilling chase in which this scientist, Mark Wahlberg, he's leading a group of people. At one point, he convinces them to split up into 2 because they need to outrace the wind to stay alive. Because, the wind is carrying whatever's coming from the plants, the toxin that's causing people to turn into zombies and kill themselves. His brilliant idea is for them to split up, to run in different directions and try to outrace the wind. That's their only chance at survival. And it is so ridiculous, but it's funny. 4 stars. Far better than Bird Box. Yeah, because, well, personally, I thought Bird Box was boring. I couldn't sit through the whole thing. This is funny. I laughed out loud. Half a star. I know a lot of people say this movie was so bad that it's good, but I see it. I just hated watching it. Now, with this one, I'll agree. This is one of those movies you can say the old line, it's so bad that it's good. It is. Crack open a beer and laugh your ass off. It is. 5 stars. I liked the movie. It's not perfect, but the ratio greatly doesn't reflect the movie's value. Well, I'll kind of agree there. I don't think it should be as rotten. I think it should go up to 50% and be considered a comedy, because it does make you laugh sometimes. Now, it's not a fresh or a great comedy, but it is a comedy, and it's certainly not rotten all the way down into the single digits, because as a comedy it actually gets up to almost, it could almost approach not being rotten if it were just edited a little bit. 2 stars. Definitely not scary or a horror. Had one good scare. Really? I'm not sure what scare that was. Okay. Expectations were very high for this movie, hence it hurts that much more that it wasn't good. Acting is okay from a talented cast. The story had tons and tons of potential, but just went a different direction after an awesome opening. I'm not sure what movie they're talking about. There was no awesome opening, and no, sorry. 4 stars, a competent and effective modern horror disaster movie. That's like sarcasm. Half a star, the unhappening, not scary, nothing happens. No, you'll laugh if you just see it as a comedy. 3 stars, unintentional hilarity at its most finest. You will hold your sides with laughter watching Marky Mark compromise with a plastic houseplant and marvel at the intense chase sequence from none other than Air. The more serious the plot tries to be, the more you will hold your sides with laughter. By the end, one thing is for sure, you will want or dread the sight of hot dogs again. Now, I agree that sums it up. I'm going to call this one. I think that's sufficient enough to make my point. Again, I don't feel that this movie deserves to be rotten to this degree. I think it should, have an audience score of around 50%. Could keep the rotten though. And just like consider this a comedy. And it has laughs. It has laugh out loud laughs. I'll give credit to, Marky Mark. He can make you laugh when he tries, and he made me laugh. So until the next Rotten Review episode, I'm out of here.